So as the stock market crashes, let's talk about the new Black Country New Road album. So this album, I didn't realize was coming out as quick as it was, because this video I was originally going to do like 2 months ago, and then it just kept getting pushed further and further away until now we have a new album. So that said, the original intention of this video was to go through their, at the time, 3 albums. That way I could then do another follow-up on this new album, and I'm kind of glad I waited because I do have some thoughts on the new album and really a general sound, change in sound that happens throughout this band's career. So what made me actually sit down to listen to Black Country New Road was a friend of mine sent me, I believe it was Sunglasses, and I really liked that song. I kept looking for live performances of it. I then listened to For the First Time, and for the first time didn't really capture me the first time around, but then every subsequent listen it has kind of gotten a bit better. It's gotten a little bit more of its claws into me. Well, let's go ahead and just talk about that album. So For the First Time, this is their debut album. It's actually a pandemic album, kind of, I think, because it came out in 2021, but a lot of this material, from what I can tell, had already existed. In fact, there's actually a live album that is attached to the Ants From Up There deluxe version that, from what I can tell, was for a show that happened right before the lockdown. And that particular show, by the way, goes through the entirety of For the First Time, plus a couple of songs that then later appear on Ants From Up There. Now, this album does start with an instrumental. The instrumental is pretty cool. It gives you a good idea to what the sound of the whole band is, which at this point in time is going to be this very jazzy, somewhat experimental sound. Now, the thing is, though, is that this particular sound does, at this point moving forward, show up in places. It's not the whole experience. You aren't experiencing, say, like Bitches Brew by Miles Davis. No, this is mostly going to be like a back and forth between jazz, a little bit of folk, and some rock. And trust me, it changes by the next album. To me, I feel like this album's most approachable moment is probably track X. However, track X also isn't really a song that I'm that really into. It's a cool song, it sounds nice. But for me, I found that Opus, with it being pretty ominous, it ended up being one of the highlights of the album. And yes, it is the closing track. But its last few minutes is a really good send-off for the whole album. But I can't talk about this album without talking a little bit about Sunglasses. Sunglasses was my introduction to Black Country New Road, and this is a song that is in 3 parts. You have an intro, a very slow intro, and then it transitions into this middle section that is very pretty. There's actually a like saxophone feature on this that just sounds immaculate. And then it transitions into its ending, which is this like very rough, jagged, like rock and jazz fusion thing where the story of this song pretty much is all about like one man's view of themselves, their confidence, all that. And at this point, you end up with a section that is all about like this false confidence just by putting on sunglasses. Overall, really cool song, and it's a song that I will talk about again in just a moment because we are going to talk about that live album I mentioned before. So overall, what are my feelings on For the First Time? Well, it is a really good, and it really is, a really good start to this band's career. They also had been around for a while before this, so they were able to really refine their craft, and you can tell based off of listening to this album. This is a very refined album. The sound is very clean, until it's not for certain parts, like when you get to the heavier parts like Sunglasses or Opus, or Science Fair. But the overall quality is very consistent. The overall sound is very pleasing to my ears, even if there are a couple of moments that I'm not as big of a fan of. For me, the instrumental Sunglasses and Opus are the best tracks on the album. And now we're going to talk about Ants From Up There. You have seen this album cover, because this is the album cover that actually introduced me to Black Country New Road. Probably because of some video I watched where I thought, oh, that's kind of an interesting album cover. And then I never listened to the album until more recently. This is a much longer album and a little bit more varied compared to the previous one. They take their previous jazz sound and evolve it a little bit into a bit of a classical sound, strangely. Like, a little bit. Again, you have an intro, which then goes into Chaos Space Marine, and interestingly, the album starts with a new emotion, because for the first time, it felt very serious and melancholic, but already with Chaos Space Marine, it's now very upbeat and happy. To then go into Concord, which is this very slow, lovey ballad. In fact, I guess I should mention that at this point in Black Country New Road's career, all of their lyrics, for the most part, are like just love songs, or very much in that kind of vein. So it's not unexpected for Concord to be this slow ballad. It's not unexpected for then the place where you insert the blade to be this like upbeat, very hopeful and optimistic song that starts with a piano but then just builds into this awesome crescendo by the end. And then likewise do that again with Basketball Shoes. Basketball Shoes, I was kind of getting a little bit of deja vu because about 6 minutes 40 into that song, there's a guitar that starts playing and I think, oh, is this about to go into the riff for Sunglasses? It doesn't, but... And then even the ending, the last couple minutes, starting at 9 minutes, was pretty unexpected. To me, it almost sounded like they had a choir, but really deep in the mix. I don't know, maybe that was just kind of causing an illusion for me. Like, I'm picturing this, like, epic ending with a choir, as you have the band playing and all of that. Now that I think about it, I don't know if they would be able to do that or not, just because of trying to record this during, like, 2021 and all that. Listening to this album, it makes a lot of sense why people really got into it, why this became such a big album, and why it got so much attention by the press, by people that listen to music in general. You know what I'm talking about. Especially with, say, like, coverage from Anthony Fantano and the like. So it makes a lot of sense why this album got so much praise. However, I'm not sold on it that much. The sound isn't entirely for me, which it does hurt a little bit because I recognize that the sound is very good. It's, again, a very well-made album, and it sounds awesome. But there's just a lot of moments that I am not really, like, it doesn't do anything for me. It's not that it's bad, it's not that they're doing something wrong, it's just not really satisfying a want that I want. Makes sense? However, when it does do it on this album, again, Chaos Space Marine, Basketball Shoes, and especially the place where you insert the blade, it hits very hard. And I want to talk about the place where he inserted the blade just for a moment, because it does start off with this like slow piano thing that then transitions and keeps building and building and building until you get to this payoff towards the end. One thing I really do like about this song is, even though you listen to the lyrics and it is pretty sad once you start dissecting things and then figure out exactly what the song's actually about. But I think what sells this for me is, and I have to echo this with about every video that I do on music, I always listen for the sound of the song first before I go into the lyrics. And this song was one of those instances where I liked how it sounded so much that I then went back in to look at the lyrics. But what I really liked about this, that I think sold me on the song even more, was the passion behind Isaac Wood's voice and his performance on this. This is something you can see in For the First Time and Ants from Up There that really, really shines on this particular song. Where, again, even though it is talking about very sad circumstances, this relationship that he is describing not just is something where there's so much passion and love behind it, but it's also very healing. And I think that works fantastically for what the song is. So now I gotta make a special note here. Ants from Up There overall is a evolution of the sound from For the First Time. However, it is in a direction where I'm not completely sold on it. I recognize that's still very good, it's just not a thing that is really for me. And even with that said, it does have a couple more highlights than the previous album, mostly because of it having more songs. But again, there are not a lot of songs on this particular album that I feel like I will be returning to. Now with this album, it does sound like the band has found its direction, which is unfortunate because of what is about to happen. So, right before the album came out, the frontman, not just anyone, the frontman and one of the founders of the band and the lead singer, and I think also the lead guitarist, ends up quitting. Isaac Wood is gone. And now the band is a 6-piece band. So, because of that, they canceled touring for a little while they're trying to now figure out what to do next. I would imagine, because the thing I've read is that they have decided to not perform any of the songs from these first 2 albums because they were Isaac Wood's songs. So out of respect to him for not being in the band, they're not going to just perform these songs. So, what do you do next? And until they figure out what to do next, we have a deluxe version of Ants From Up There that is functionally a live album. So let's talk about this for a second. Now, the album does feature some stuff that does appear on Ants From Up There, like Mark's theme, Bread Song, and Basketball Shoes. But it is pretty much a front-to-back performance of their first album. And I gotta say, this is a really good version of that album, because it is a live version of that album, so everything ends up just sounding better because you're hearing a recording of it being done live. Now, I imagine in the studio, yeah, it is being done live because you gotta record it, but it being performed on this stage where you have the reverb of the venue, and then, strangely, a really quiet audience. Like, it almost sounds like the audience that is there isn't who you would expect to be a Black Country New Road fan, but instead, like, people that decide to go there to watch a symphony perform. Where they're just doing very polite clapping, like it's golf. So it is really weird in that respect. Another thing as well of note is that the instrumental song, by the way, fucking amazing start to this live album. That is a song that you could tell on the studio recording would go hard live. It goes hard live. Notably with the song Sunglasses, it is a lot slower, and its ending is totally reworked. So, on the original recording, it kept building up to this loud, explosive ending, and this time, it gets quiet, and then does a new crescendo to then build up to a finale that is slow and very loud and, frankly, pretty symphonic feeling. Also, the lyrics are totally different. He sounds a lot more defeated in this version with its ending, where, again, in the studio version, it's like, I have this big ego because I have these sunglasses on. This is, like, the realization of the sunglasses not doing anything. Yeah, and then this album also features Bread Song and Basketball Shoes. Side note, by the way, with Bread Song. It's funny because when I got to about 5 minutes and 30 seconds into Bread Song was when I realized, oh, it's a love song because of some of the lyrics. Specifically what I wrote down was, don't leave your toast in my bread. In my bed. Don't leave your toast in my bed. But another thing I want to say real quick about Bread Song, and maybe someone can help me, and is like on the same wavelength as I am. This song, probably for the first couple of minutes, I would say, it reminds me of another song, and I don't know what this song is. And part of me wants to say there is something, I'm somehow being reminded of something from maybe Kid A, but I don't think I am being reminded of that at all. I keep seeing Kid A, but it's maybe like 5% of the sound that I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of something else entirely, and I don't know. It's bothering me that I can't think of what this song is, because I know that I listened to this song a good few times a couple years ago. The song I'm thinking of, not Bread Song. Okay, so after you have this deluxe version, you now have new Black Country New Road in effect. So here's the thing. The circumstances that made it very difficult for this band to continue are very unfortunate, because the previous 2 albums are very good. Their material, very good. I may not have been as big of a fan overall of Ants From Up There compared to the first album, However, there are moments on Anthem up there that I think it would be awesome to see live. But unfortunately, they aren't going to perform their old material out of respect for their previous band member. So now, along with losing their frontman, you gotta find a new direction for the band, or the band is done. This brings us to a performance they did at Busch Hall that they recorded, also turned into like a concert film. I only listened to the album version, so I wasn't watching the film. This album, I was not really expecting this sound. There is still a little bit of the previous Black Country New Road sound in this album, but this album is so different. I think that this is going to be the kind of thing that will make or break the band for a lot of people, just because of it being such a different sound, and then also that being the same sound that Forever How Long, their new album, continues to go with. So, live at Busch Hall, this is the first note that I wrote, by the way, for Up Song. The beginning sounds like clowns, because it's just like these kind of honking horns. And then 42 seconds in, what is this? Where did this come from? Where did this particular sound come from? Because this is not at all what I was expecting this band would decide to go with. And then you have a lyric like Black Country New Road or a BCNR, Friends Forever. Like, okay, I get it. I can roll with this a little bit. Where this is the song that opens up the concert, and it's just a song thanking the audience before the show has begun. And as well recognizing the turbulent times that they were in. I imagine as well that this would have been one of the first times of them returning back to touring in general, or performing live, given everything that had just happened the previous 2 years. Because I think this was, I want to say this was recorded in 2023, I think. Okay, no, so this was recorded at the very end of December 15th and 16th, and then released at the beginning of, March 2023. Yeah, so I understand the reason why you would have this song. It's a little bit indulgent, but because it's recognizing, hey, we are very thankful for you still being with us and coming to our shows, because we know shit's been rough for a little while. And then you get to the boy, and this is just straight up a fairy tale. You have with some of the lyrics, you have clear chapter marks, like the singer saying, Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 3. I Won't Always Love. This song reminds me of a, like, singing number from an old film until about 2 minutes in when it changes. If you know what I'm talking about, then you know what I'm talking about. After this 2-minute mark, this part of the song I like a lot more, but it's those first 2 minutes that just don't really do anything for me. Then you get to Laughing Song, and this is when it kind of hits me what is going on with this album, because this is not really the sound of the previous 2 albums. And it's on this song that I write the comment, this album so far feels a bit juvenile. The song is cool, but that is pretty much the sentiment that I have with this album. And perhaps even the next one as well, which we are about to get to. Where there are some moments where it does kind of veer away from that a little bit. Turbines and Pigs, it isn't quite as juvenile as Laughing Song, but this whole album is, it really feels like the equivalent of making the moral of the story was friendship and just turning it into an album. Is that necessarily a bad thing? Not entirely. But I'm not sold on it. There are highlights on this album. There were some songs that I liked, but otherwise, this entire album is so saturated in this optimism and, like, this kind of juvenile sentiment. It doesn't really work for me. And so that gets us to the new album that released today. Yeah. If you really liked the live album, if you really liked Live from Busch Hall, or Live at Busch Hall, then you will like this album. However, all of my complaints from the previous album are still around on this album. Even the opening song, Besties. The note I wrote was really a harpsichord. And it's still indulging in this, like, fantasy around the idea of friendship and being incredible friends and, like, a like a nice summer day with your friends. It's just so upbeat, and it doesn't really change that much either throughout the runtime of the album. That it's lost me, unfortunately. Now, I will say this album did have a couple of moments that did stand out to me. Two Horses, notably. It was like this romance between two people, and then towards the end, one of them kills the other's horse. So, hey, that was very different for how this whole album was going. So I liked that. There's also a moment on For the Cold Country where it sounded a bit like a song from Toho, which threw me off. That's all I was able to think about for the remainder of that song. And then the following song, Nancy Tries to Take the Night. Yeah, this is kind of the last song to actually take my attention, especially at 4 minutes 30.
The place does not take the smile off your face while you're just like a cow when you're frolicking round with legs in the air. Smile on your face, but it's covered in hair. Do you want it? Oh no, and do you want it now? Oh, just imagine a life. There's a baby and a wife with the times of the night when compared to the night, but the mind's not there, so you sit in despair. Curse of the sky with the cry, it's not fair to you.
Here's the problem. And this is why it loses me a lot. And I'm going to talk about both Forever How Long and as well Live at Bush Hall. Both of these albums end up doing this thing that I think perfectly sums up my attitude of it, where the opening and ending, it has like a good morning, welcome to the show, and good night, that's the end of our broadcast thing going on, where it feels a lot like children's programming in that way. And I know it's not trying to, because obviously it's not children that are going to be listening to these songs, but it does just have that kind of feel to it that does throw me off some. So because the whole album does have a bit of that feeling, it does make it difficult for me to get into it and to really care that much. Because, yeah, listening to this second album, I was hoping that they would depart from Live at Bush Hall, because everything that we were getting, it was like the first album sounded a certain way, the second album evolved on that, the third album, it had to completely change, and now the fourth album, it isn't like it changed that much, it actually has cemented their live performance album a lot more. I feel like that now it becomes clear that there definitely was an older Black Country New Road that had a particular sound, and now there's a newer Black Country New Road that is going to have this new sound, probably going for the next couple of albums if I had to guess. So that concludes my thoughts on Black Country New Road as a whole. Again, the first two albums I think are pretty good. First album I like. The second album, there's moments on that I really do like, that I think, as I have been speaking about this, has made me think about that album a little bit better in better light, I should say, than previously. But then these last two albums, I think I'm a little bit lost. I think I'm a little bit lost from this. And again, that is not to say that these are bad albums at all, but do know that if you were expecting anything from their first half, if you're going into the third album expecting stuff like the second album because maybe you didn't listen to Live at Bush Hall, you are probably going to be disappointed a bit, depending on what it is exactly that you liked off of Ants From Up There. Now on to something completely different. Let's talk about some albums I've listened to, and also address a couple of things from the previous video, the one I did on Monarch of Monsters. A lot of you have recommended different albums of hers to me. I need to still get to those. I need to get to listening to the rest of her discography. I haven't been able to get to it. But yeah, I do still intend on listening to more of her discography, because that album still gets put on rotation sometimes for me, even after, I think now, 4 months since I made that video. I still have to also read the novella that was released with it. But yeah, a lot of you have basically been recommending just different albums out for Discography. I think some of these are more recent ones. Like, there's one that I've seen a couple of times called Carousel that I need to listen to. There's also Girls Who Are Wizards that I need to listen to. Yeah, a lot of suggestions I still gotta get to. But I did want to at least acknowledge that, to say that, hey, I am looking at the comments on that video. I see what you guys are saying. Now, on to another album that I want to briefly just comment about. That new Jordy Griep album, man, that is a good album. I meant to listen to that before the year was up, and it just ended up slipping me, and then I finally listened to it, and it is so good. Because I have a friend who kept talking about that album, and had actually sent, I forget what song, I think it was Holy. Yeah, Holy Holy was sent, and it sounded pretty good. So I'm excited that we got new material from him, especially because it has been a little while since Black Midi had released a new album. I remember listening to Hellfire, I think roughly around when it came out, and I remember that was on rotation for a while. I was listening to that so much. Oh yeah, that's right. There's also that one Synthony album that was a remix of Draining Love Story. The, like, Sewer Slut Synthony, whatever's actually going on with that. I don't know if it's... I know it's supposed to be like a new identity, but it's kind of going back and forth because, like, even that album that I just said, the Draining Love Story, the remix of it, was released under both names. I thought that album came out right at the end of 2024. I didn't realize it came out at the end of January. Yeah, that album came out. It is... Draining Love Story is still my favorite Sewer Slut album. So, it basically being a remake of that was really good. There was some good remixes as well that came out of some of the songs there, but that's an album I recommend listening to. Because it pretty much was this expansion, it pretty much comes out as this expansion of the previous album, but then also an upgrade in a way. I still think the previous album is worth listening to, but this new version of it, definitely very interesting. It sort of answers a question that I've had in my head about if artists remade their albums, and that's precisely what the album is. This was a song that came out, but I've just been listening to a lot. I don't think there's an album tied to it, but IX Falls. This was an artist that I had covered in one of my albums I've listened to videos. This was a long time ago, but they've come out with a new song, Without You Tonight, that is very catchy. There's also that new Weather Day album that I guess I have to censor if I show it because... for some reason, Fantano had to censor it because YouTube thought the album artwork was someone throwing up. Granted, it is someone eating their hand, so it's, you know, it's still not that much better, but that was a funny thing I saw when he did his review on that album. But yeah, that's a pretty good album as well. Alright, well, that's the end of the video. If you want to listen to another video about me talking about music, check out my video on Monarch of Monsters. In a couple of months, I'm going to be doing a video on Wish You Were Here once that album reaches 50. Yeah, but if you want to see me do more videos on more albums, let me know. If you want to recommend albums, go ahead and do that. I'll try to get to them. Follow me over on Blue Sky, absoluteproblem.com, and subscribe to the channels. I'm out.